Today, my presentation is about managing a mountain park in a dynamic context. I want to tell you my story, and my story is largely around writing this presentation. To write my presentation, I thought I'd watch TV, and I happened to turn on to one of our obscure TV channels called, I can't remember what it was, but it was a program called Walking in the Himalayas. And the journey ended up in Bhutan. And I had the privilege of going to Bhutan 30 years ago. And there's a story in that. I didn't have to pay 250 US a day, but I managed to spend a month there. And you know, you think about some of those defining experiences you have in life. Well, that was probably one of them. But on that story, it ended up at this mountain, Gunga Pensum. And I probably haven't pronounced that right. Its height is 7,570 meters. Apparently, it's the highest unclimbed mountain in the world. And it's in the eastern Himalayas near the border with China. Now, it made me think about Bhutan, and I'm surprised that no one's actually mentioned it in all of the conversations about mountains. And where I'm getting to this, it's about that spirituality of mountains. And Bhutan, I guess, has been lucky that it had the opportunity to look at other experiences of the world, including its near neighbour, Nepal. And it learnt from that. And I guess they came up with a concept around how they would manage their mountains because of their sacredness. And basically, their policy is climbing of mountains higher than 6,000 meters is prohibited since 1994. Now, I presume that's still correct. I would love to go back there to check it out 30 years later. And if anyone's prepared to sponsor me, I'm putting my hand up for that one. But I'm starting this presentation on that basis. And I guess we've heard it all before, and what I'm saying in this presentation is nothing different to anyone else has said. It's about the spiritual significance of mountains and the role that they play in management. I'm in the management camp, and my role is about, and other managers, is about trying to manage these places to ensure some of that integrity of that. But mountains are many places to many people. Now, I remind myself daily, and sometimes I have to remind my staff, that people are coming here for a mountain holiday. Doesn't matter whether they're a climber or someone on a bus who's coming through for a day trip. It's taking people's or visitors out of their normal lives into somewhere special. And I guess this is all about our vision for DOC and what we're trying to achieve. It's about enriching people's experiences and especially outdoor experiences. And so that's the start of the spiritual aspect of this and the cultural aspect of this presentation. So I guess what I'm saying here is this little story defines how we will manage this place into the future, and it's also about can DOC be more agile in keeping up in an ever-changing world? And I guess that's the dynamic context that I want to talk about. So there's the obvious, the spiritual theme, the significance of this place to Ngāi Tahu, to climbers, and just to visitors. And you've got quite a few people in this room who have spent time in this place, and it's pretty clear it's left a lasting impression on people. And those people always remember their time at this place. It's also some historical story about Ngāi Tahu. It's also about pastoralism, because you've got to remember that post Ngāi Tahu's use of this place, it also was a pastoral lease, and that's part of the story as well. And then tourism came along, and then we've got the management theme, conservation, and then for management of this place, clearly a fairly defining moment is the Ngāi Tahu deed of settlement, and you heard a bit about that. And overlaying all of this which creates the change, is the geological and glacial processes that are going on. So for Ngāi Tahu, Aoraki is the most significant, is the most sacred of ancestors, provides a sense of community identity, solidarity and purpose. It's about their whole creation story and its spiritual association. And under the deed of settlement, a concept was developed called taponi, which is a cloak of protection over Aoraki. And this defines their spiritual association with this place. The geological glacial theme started 800 million years ago with Gondwana land, and I'm not going to give you a lesson in geology. It's all about the alpine fault, glaciers and erosion. And I guess this is one of the other themes that is going to run through my presentation. It's about defines today's access and opportunities and values for the future. And access is a pretty important word, and it's an important aspect of this presentation. 1840 is a significant time. That was the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi and the expectation that Ngāi Tahu had about their ancestral lands. Along came 1848, and that was clearly tested with the Kemp Purchase of Canterbury. And you saw that in Ngāi Tahu's presentation. And that defined their view of this place from there on. 1858, we had the first establishment of farming within this place with the Glen Tanner Run and then the Birch Hill Run. And then in 1884, you see the first of tourism starting here with the building of the first hermitage and the first ranger. It wasn't until 1882 that climbing began in this place. And then there was a whole history of climbing that developed from here. 1886, the first passenger service, and then in 1890, Bull Hut was built. And so you can see all of these themes running through in terms of its historical association with this place. And in 1894, Aoraki Mount Cook was climbed. 1895, government decided to take an interest in this place by buying the Hermitage. 1830, the first plane landing, a passenger plane landing in the valley. And then in 1853, we had the park formed. So the park has been created from 1953. 1955, the first ski play landing, and that changed the nature of tourism for this place. Then we move along to 1987 when Dock was created. And something that we tend to overlook here is that in 1986 and 1990, we had the creation of Te Waipanāmu World Heritage Site. So we are part of that wider World Heritage Site. And then in 1998, we had the Ngāi Tahu Deed of Settlement. And that took 150 years or more for the recognition of Ngāi Tahu's association with this place in a formal way. And for the department, that defines where we go forward in terms of management. So that brings us to 2016 and the management plan review. And part of this presentation is a plug for the management plan review and how important that review is in the context of the history that I've just told you. So that history defines today's critical issues for management. So we've got 70,000 hectares, we've got 25 summits over 3,000 metres, and clearly this has been a proving ground for climbers, and you've got many of them in this room, and we've exported that expertise across the world. And as we well know, Sir Edmund Hillary is probably our greatest export that we brought back, and it demonstrates the value of this place. We estimate that we have over 500,000 visitors per annum. Now that's based on road counters on this road, so it's an extrapolated cost number. We spend 2.6 million. And then we have a revenue target of 1.5 million. But that's some of our reality about managing this place. how do you use that money to address your priorities in this room? And that's what Doc's issue is. You all have priorities based on the values that you place on these places. We have a budget to actually allocate those priorities to those values. Not an easy job sometimes. When I say I have a target of 1.5 million in revenue, this place actually generates more revenue through concessions. I can't give you that figure because it's not in my budget, but I'm sure we could come up with it. It generates much more than that figure there. That's directly what we get in terms of revenue through our campgrounds, huts, revenue out of our visitor centre. Any dollar that we get here offsets our operating costs. So that's why Doc gets a little bit fixated with revenue sometimes. Since 2010, we've spent $15 million of capital in this place. So that's a considerable investment in this place for all of the obvious reasons. And people can have a debate about whether that's the best use of capital. The bottom line is people come here, we've got to manage the people when we come here. And to do it in the best way, we have to spend capital on it. I want to talk about places now, and places from my point of view are defined by access. Now this is my definition as a manager of the places, okay? So we've got high alpine, and these are defined, I've defined them in three ways, by accessibility, demand, and the impacts. And so high alpine is, in terms of accessibility, it's low. Most people can't go there. You have to have the skills to go there. By definition, it's not easy to access. In terms of demand, and when I talk about demand, how many people are going there over time? Our view is probably static. If we had more trend data, it may indicate that it's declining. There is a whole lot of reasons that we can put around that. One is physical accessibility. One is the amount of time people actually have to spend on their trips. And the window of opportunity in this place is very narrow, to the extent where we are reviewing our SAR program to start it earlier because people are now climbing earlier. And so that is an impact of access as well, you know, the ability to get up glaciers, things opening up. It's harder to access these places, plus cost, and that's a factor on top of that. So in terms of the impacts around this place, we believe they're managed, but we could implement greater efficiency around these things. Greater efficiency means spending more money. The subalpine, and I use that loosely, it's probably the valley floors as well. That's where, in terms of accessibility, you can have a less amount of skills, but you have to have a reasonable amount of skills and ability to get to a place like Mueller. But that's where our growth is. It's high and it's growing, and I believe we're holding the line on that, but again, we need new approaches to management. And then lastly, the village itself, which is our local body operation. The accessibility is high. You don't need a lot of skills to walk around our village. And for many people who visit, that's all they do. And the demand for that is high and growing. And you want to be here on a busy summer's day, and you will see that. And again, I believe we're holding the line, but we need new approaches. And it's about the vehicle. You know, Tourism New Zealand has been really effective of marketing New Zealand and getting people here. The next phase is how we manage them when they're here. And the vehicle, and trying to manage vehicles, whether it be here or at Tongariro or at Milford, is going to be our biggest challenge. And that's because they've marketed, you hop in your vehicle and you visit these places. Gone are the days where a whole lot of people hopped in a bus and visited. So there are the places, just to illustrate it clearly, that's the village area which we're in at the moment. The high alpine is this area here, obviously the highest parts of the park, and the bit in between I've loosely called subalpine area. So if I want to move on to the village place, so it's the gateway to the park. We're experiencing in the order of 15% growth. The facilities and assets we've got here are the village short walks. We've got a visitor centre. This is where I'll start throwing lots of numbers at you. Visitor centre, around 125,000 people per annum use it. Costs about $372,000 to run. We make revenue in the order of $350,000, and it's about managing visitor information and trying to mitigate risk, giving good advice to people about using this place so they don't get in trouble. In terms of accommodation in the village, we can house about 1,400 people per night. Over the summer period, we were running at about 90% occupancy. Some places have been at 100% occupancy for the summer. We used to have a shoulder season. That's effectively gone. Winter is now becoming busy. We used to have our staff go on leave in winter. Now I'm struggling to have enough staff to cope with the visitors that are coming through, and we're having to rejig how we manage our staff in terms of those things. In terms of staff in the village, it's probably at peak around 300 people. The equation is you have more visitors, you need to have more staff, you need more accommodation. There are some real limiting factors in managing a place like this. And that brings us on to the local body operation. It's about managing the infrastructure services. At the moment, it costs around $860,000 to run all of the services here. We get all of that back from the stakeholders minus our contribution. So there is an equation that we run, and we make up our 9% of the use of this place, which is about $70,000. The major contribution is from the owners of this place. So that's where most of the cost is, around 70% of it. In terms of the services that we run, the biggest increase that we're seeing is around solid waste. It makes up 30% of the costs, and it's an increase on 10% on last year. So basically, more people, more rubbish. So the big challenges in the village places, visitor growth, increasing pressure on our infrastructure services, increased demand for visitor and staff accommodation, increased pressure on car parking. You only have to build larger camper vans and try and fit them into a very small car park and know that you've got an equation that's difficult. So, you know, the whole business of how we manage vehicles in the village needs to be talked about. It's no different to the Tongariro situation. There's also more demand for concessions because people see more people and it creates more business opportunities. So now I'll take you to your favourite place, or most of your favourite place. It's the high alpine place. So this is where you need alpine skills. It's not for everyone. There are costs around this. To manage our alpine huts is probably in the order of $120,000. We make reasonable revenue from it. Doesn't outlay the costs. We have 8 dock huts ranging from Kelman at 22, which has about 1,080 bed nights per annum, through to Empress, which we'd be lucky to get 9 people a year there. Alpine Club's got a hut here, Murchison Hut. As you're well aware, we've lost Gardner Hut to a rock avalanche. We had a near miss with Plateau. Plateau in itself is an interesting story. It's a large hut. It gets reasonable level of use, but just to illustrate cost, it cost us $900,000 in 2004 to build. Now, I don't want to bore you with accounting stuff, but for every capital purchase or investment we make, we have to pay capital charge and depreciation, which comes out of our budget. That is a real killer for us. The more assets that we have, the more operating costs. And we run a search and rescue program that costs us $193,000. I'm not going to dwell too much on that, but we are having change in seasons and change in our responses out there. The whole PLB, personal locator beacon thing, has changed the nature of our responses. So for alpine huts, the major issue is starting to decreasing demand and higher costs. And over 80% of our costs are around helicopter costs for gas and waste management, flying out waste. And we need for greater efficiency and new approaches in waste management. And I think the thing that people don't really appreciate is the compliance costs that we as a government organisation have to comply with. And when I hear stories coming back to me about, oh, I heard you went up to Empress Hut and you flew a mattress in and that was all that you did, there is more to a story than that. We have a regime of inspecting all of our huts on an annual basis based on risk. And so we have a whole set of compliance criteria that we have to go through. Included in that is issues like fire safety and fire evacuation. Now, if we didn't do a deal with the fire service around trading away fire evacuation schemes for a simple thing like having fire retardant mattresses, then we would be up for way bigger costs. And these are some of the issues that you as users need to understand around our compliance costs. And I'm sure Alpine Club are learning this one with the development of the Mid-Tasman hut. And I will leave you to tell that story about that, but that's our world. And that's really what the subalpine place looks like. It's the valley floor, it's going up to Mueller, it's going up to Bull Shelter, which leads us on to the subalpine place. This is where we've got our destination huts. The best example is Mueller, 30 bunk hut, 3,000 bed nights per annum, costs us about 60 grand to run. Our revenue is twice that. Cost us 700,000 in 2004. Effectively, what we earn out of Mueller can subsidise all of the other huts. So if you want to look at a hut individually, you can run some numbers about cost efficiency, but in some ways we have to look at the whole. So if we can make more money out of one hut and subsidise the use of others, it may be a different way of looking at things. And even we're seeing growth in a place like Bull Shelter. Only cost us 90 grand in 2010 and we get a reasonable amount of use out of it. We've also got a number of other hunter climbers huts that get very low use and low return. And the whole issue around, we've largely got climbers in this room, but the whole issue around hunters' payment for huts is another issue. And some of them are spending considerable amount of money to undertake their recreation activity as well. And I think it's an area that we need to focus on a little bit more as well. So within this area, we've got the campground, which has got about 2,600 people using it per annum and growing. We make good revenue out of that. We've got the hooker track at 72,000 people per annum. Basically, it was designed to manage visitor risk, putting a track in a place where you can safely go without worrying about the risk. And we've got some very unskilled people using that track, and they can use that without that worry. It cost us $1.8 million to develop that. We've also sealed the Tasman Valley Road. That cost us $2.2 million. They are the examples of investment that we've made in this place. And so the critical issues there are Mueller Hut, campground, the hooker track, and the increased demand and the increased revenue and costs, and the increased pressure on waste management. This is my plug for the management plan. Our major critical issues for the future in the context of the management plan review and the different values that people hold for this place is about how to respond to climate change and its consequences for maintaining opportunities and facilities for recreation, and how to manage the projected increase in visitor numbers and the demands that they will place on this place and the facilities that we manage. Just to reinforce the value and the role of the plan, it's about the resolution of conflicts between the protection of values and use of areas, and the guidance in terms of the assessment of future or existing concession applications, and providing a monitoring framework for implementation, reporting, review of policies and outcomes. It's a working document to guide decision-making for operations management. So it holds a very important role in terms of the future of this place. I can list a whole list of critical issues that I as a manager have, and I won't begin to read them all out, but I'll focus on a few of them. You know, some of it is about maximising revenue opportunities on the basis of visitor growth. And one of the key issues that I see for us as an organisation is how can we be more agile as an organisation to respond to trends? And I share your frustration as users sometimes when you come up with a really pragmatic approach that sometimes we could agree to, and we're locked into some statutory processes that don't allow us to do that. And in terms of management of some of these places, that is a constraint that we have to work to. I won't go into the political constraints that work around these things, but you need to appreciate that what seems sometimes really simple as a solution isn't always easy to do from a legislative point of view. My summary, it's just basically a story about this place. It's the story from the local bureaucrat. It's about the management issues in the context of the different values that people have about this place. Key to the future is how does Ngāi Tahu and DOC write a plan for this place for the future. And you have a role in contributing and helping shaping that plan. And I guess this is why I've got this slide here, because as people have said, that the kids of the future need to have a place like we have had the opportunity to use this place.